Bonjour à tous. Welcome to this session about VSCode and ABL. So my name is Gilles Querret. I'm working for Riverside Software, a software company which is based in France, in the south of France. You probably already know me. Many of you probably already know me because I'm also the author of PCT, which is a build automation tool for OpenEdge. Also the author of the OpenEdge plugin for SonarQube, and now working on VSCode. So that will be the topic of this session. It is specifically an afternoon about VS Code. We have this session today, the intro about this new plugin, another session by Baltic Amadeus Neg following this one, and then another one by Ken Herring. So first, quick survey. In the audience, how many of you are working with VS Code for OpenEdge or any other language? Excellent. So this is also confirmed by the survey, the Stack Overflow developer survey. Here are the figures. This session has been done first in 2021. That was the first presentation about the VS Code plugin, which was not available at this time. So I just took the Stack Overflow developer survey, updated it in 2022 for during the Pug Challenge last year, and 2023 for the various Pug events this year. So the question is about which development environment do you use regularly in the past year and you will want to work with over the next year? So the answer is clearly VS Code. So in 2021, 71% of the audience was working with VS Code, 2022, 74%, and also 74% in 2023. Clearly the winner. And the reason is it is very fast. It is very fast to start. It is very flexible. Many languages are supported by VS Code, and so this is highly popular in terms of development environment. So it's very versatile, working with many different languages: TypeScript, JavaScript, OpenEdge, Java, C, C#, and also completely unknown languages. So back to the beginning, VS Code was also is a code editor which is developed by Microsoft, which is available on Windows, Linux, and also macOS. So the project was started approximately in 2013, with the first version released in 2015. So it took a couple years to set up the infrastructure and to make that work correctly. So it was designed by Eric Gamma, who is one of the guys in the Gang of Four, the guys who designed the design patterns, wrote the design patterns book, very popular book. So he was also behind Eclipse, so he already had a huge experience working with IDEs and popular IDEs, and so he was able to use his experience working on Eclipse to design something new, better, with a better architecture. So it is open source. Microsoft did a very good job in the recent years to move many components from proprietary to open source. If you go to the GitHub of Microsoft, you will see many projects where the source code is available, and this is a very a trend which was new a few years ago. We are now getting used to have open source coming from Microsoft, but this is not something you would have bet on 10 or 15 years ago, probably. Everything coming from Microsoft was closed source, expensive, with salespeople coming to your company here just to suck money out of your wallet. Now many things are open source. There is a very strong community back in Microsoft and working with Microsoft on many different products. VS Code being one of those products. So, another question about the usage of VS Code. How many of you are using OpenEdge with VS Code? Okay, not so many here, which can be understood. And this is also probably the reason why you are coming to this session. So In order to be widely popular, you have to support many languages. It's impossible to have a popular IDE if you don't have support for lots of languages. Visual Studio can be extended. You can write plugins for VSCode in order to support additional extra languages. So there is a marketplace which is available. So you just go to the marketplace, type your favorite language, which can be ABL or Python or C++. You will likely to find a plugin for that in order to support the language within VS Code and to provide some syntax highlight, code completion, be able to compile your code, to execute your code from the IDE. So you will find here we have extensions are categorized by topic. Just in terms of programming languages, you have more than 5,000 results. So I wouldn't say that there are more than 5,000 languages being supported, probably a bit less than that. But you can find support for very popular languages, Python. You will find also support for completely obscure languages, such as brainfuck, for example, which is something completely crazy, a crazy language. And if you have a look, for example, at the Code Golf session on Stack Overflow, this is a section where super geek people are going and they work on languages based, for example, just on dots, for example. Dot and comma. This is the only tokens that you can use. And then you write something with that. And so you can find support for such languages in VS Code. Google Code Golf on Stack Overflow. That's crazy, absolutely crazy. So in order to support languages, you have to bring something in order to make it easy here for extension developers to be able to write extensions. You have to bring something to support new languages. And this is the language server. So the language server is a protocol, I would say, to make it easy to provide features for languages. So if you don't have a language server and want to work with JavaScript, for example, or Java or Python or whatever the language, you have to write one extension for VS Code, for Atom, for VIM, for Eclipse, for whatever it takes. And you have to use the API which is provided by the IDE. You have to rewrite a lot of things to make that work for this specific IDE. It takes a lot of time. You rewrite the same thing again and again and again and just make some minor modification to make that work for a specific IDE. Using a language server, so LSP here, which means language server protocol, the idea is to provide a protocol that you have to implement. And so the IDE is just a client of the protocol. You work on the server side of the protocol, so you just implement entry points and you do whatever it takes to support the language in the language server. That will be consumed by the client, which can be Visual Studio Code, which can be VIM or Neo VIM, for example, which is an extension, a new version of VI, where you have support for language server. And that will also work with other IDEs. For example, I'm not sure. I think Eclipse now supports language server. It is possible to work with language server within Eclipse. So this means that you can have one implementation of the language server, which is being used in various IDEs. So you just focus on what you have to do. This is the server side of your language, and then you have entry points which are always the same because IDEs more or less always do the same. You want to modify code, you want to use code completion, you want to compile the code, execute the code, get some information at a specific location in the code, navigate to the declaration of a variable, of a class, of procedure, whatever it is. All the IDEs, they all do more or less the same. So you implement the entry point and you will have client consuming this protocol. So this is why this is one thing to bind them all. Instead of having one implementation per IDE, you have a single language server implementation, which is then consumed by various IDEs. So the protocol, a quick example on what is the protocol. Can you see something at the back of the room? Is it large enough? Maybe, yeah, more or less. Okay, so when you open the document, the development tool, VSCode, let's say, will send a notification to the language server and say, oh, I just opened this document. So you have to probably to keep it in memory, probably compute various references, compile the file so that you extract some information, just to know that this document is currently open in the IDE. Then the user will start modifying the document, so define variable something, that will send notification every time you type something that will be pushed to the language server so that it is able to recompute the syntax tree, the outline view, for example. You add a new procedure, it has to directly be present in the outline view of the IDE. So you just do things on the fly as soon as you receive a notification. At the same time, the language server is doing things. So it will say, oh, you added a new procedure or a new variable, and you don't do anything with this variable. So I will send notification back to the client and say, there is a new variable, but you didn't do anything with that. I will send you a notification. Hey, that's a warning. There's a problem because you are defining a new variable, but you don't do anything with that. So maybe you defined it for nothing. At least I will send you a warning. Or this can be also something like a compiler warning or a compiler error. You have to be notified that the code currently doesn't compile. So there will be a two-way communication between the IDE and the language server, each other sending notifications, so there are requests and notification going from one side to the other side, and you just have to handle, on the language server side, you just have to handle all of those notifications. So this communication between client and language server, just a huge set of notification going from side to side. So just also another thing, any test, is that okay? Yeah. Any IDE, I don't have sound coming from there. Test. I don't know, something is different. Okay. So any IDE can have multiple language servers, each for one language. So you will have one language server for the TypeScript code that you are currently working on, one language server for the ABL code, one language server for the Java code, each one being completely independent from the other ones. So there is no conflict between the language server. It is up to the IDE to control the communication between its environment and all the servers that are available. So the first presentation about VSCode and ABL was done in 2021. At this time, the emoji was a bit different because nothing was available. That was just a presentation saying that in a couple months, that will be available. So since approximately the beginning of 2022, I would say, the plugin is available on the marketplace. So you can install VSCode, install the extension, and have that running in your environment. So it's working. It is now quite stable. There is still a lot to be done, but this is you can already work with that in your environment. So what it brings is multiple things. So Riverside has worked on build automation since 2003. The first version of PCT is 2003, so happy birthday PCT. And so we had some experience working with build automation, and we knew exactly what to do in order to compile in the background, because we have done that a lot, having build scripts running locally in a dev environment, but also on continuous integration servers. So we knew exactly what to do to transform source code in the right way into our code and execute that in a local environment. So we have reused a lot of scripts procedure available in PCT and imported that into the language server. Then we also worked on the OpenEdge plugin for SonarQube, which is a code analysis platform for ABL. We also wanted to reuse lots of parts from the OpenEdge plugin. The first one being the parser. The idea is to transform any source code into a syntax tree so that you can extract information from your source code, which is something that you can only do with a real parser. Just one word about the extensions that are available, the previous extensions that are available for ABL. They don't rely on a real parser, so this means that they grep or the source code in the current window to extract information, which means that if you have variables defined in include files, they can't be seen by the extension. So this means that a lot is missing, and it's very easy to break the parser. Break regular expression is extremely easy. So once you have a parser, this means that you expand the include files with the right parameters, so you have exactly the right symbols imported into the syntax tree and then in the language server. So you don't miss methods or procedures that are only available 10 levels of include file below. That will be available in our plugin. So we just reuse the parser to extract the information. We also reuse the parser to execute lint rules to make sure that you don't introduce defects in your source code. And one of the ideas was also to make sure that it's possible to use the plugin on macOS, Linux, and Windows. So on macOS, I won't say that you will be able to compile locally, as there is no implementation of the AVM on macOS. I don't think that will ever come. Maybe product management is there, maybe they will do something. I don't think so, but we don't really care. But anyway, you will be able to use VSCode on Linux in order to compile locally, which is something that is not available. So we will do a demo first. So this is supposed to work as expected, but this is a demo, so there are always surprises. I tried that again this morning. Everything was working as expected, but who knows? Shit can happen. So let's see that. So give me 1 sec. I will just expand. Okay, workshop. Connection is there. VSCode is installed. Okay, that's good. Up. And let's get started. Okay, so let's start first with the configuration of the project. Do you want me to increase the font size? That may be control. Is that better? Yep. Okay, so one precision, one thing. The OpenEdge plugin for SonarQube is not a replacement for the procedure editor. So this is not meant to be, you open VSCode to modify one file, compile it, just add quickly the database connection, and generate R code. This is a project-based development environment. So this is much more like Developer Studio, where you have to define your project configuration. You have to store that on disk, so that when you open VSCode, you have access to the the right propass, to the right set of database connection. So this is not a replacement for the procedure editor. That will never become that. It is a project-based environment. So this means that you have to define a configuration file where you specify the various properties of the project. This is stored in JSON. I wanted to have a central location for the configuration file and something that you can store in your code repository. Also, everything is meant to be stored in Git. If you are not already working with Git, switch to Git. That will always be a good idea. So this is meant with Git in mind, or any source code repository, but Git is better. So any configuration file can be versioned and can be pushed in a clear text way onto your code repository. So you will have some code completion. So the configuration file is openedge-project.json. You have code completion on what you have to include in the project. So first, we just have a name and version. Version is something which is not really used for now. That will be used in the future for dependency management. And this is a topic I would like to talk to with Progress and also with the Gradle plugin, because there is some kind of dependency management. I would like to do something in an intelligent way working with Progress. So, but currently there is it doesn't do anything. So here, first, we want to define the OpenEdge version we want to work with. One difference between VSCode and Developer Studio is that you can work with any OpenEdge runtime. So there is no dependency. You can update to the latest version of the VSCode plugin and still work with 11.7. So you can have an up-to-date development environment while working with an old version of OpenEdge. So currently this is being tested with 11.7 and 12.2, 12.7, 12.8. No tests were done with 10.2b, I have to admit. So this can be configured, but use it at your own risk. So here, we will work with OpenEdge 12.7. The various versions can be configured in the user settings. So here you just specify that version 12.7 will point to Progress OpenEdge 12.7. This means that you can have in your project configuration file, you specify the version number, and then the installation path can be different on your local machine, on the development server, on your Linux box, and on any other environment. You just specify the version number in the project configuration file, which is stored in the source code repository. We also have to define a character set. We'll always use UTF-8. If you are not using UTF-8, switch to UTF-8 and do yourself some good. We can specify graphical mode. Do you want to work with a TTY compiler or GUI compiler? If you are working with PASOE, if you develop server-side code, you can work with the TTY compiler, so you specify graphical mode false. That will execute _progress to compile your code. If you work with Windows or .NET or graphical components, switch to graphical mode true. Then, number of threads. You can start multiple threads in parallel to speed up the build of your local project. We will stay with one thread in this project. We are not here to make a contest of how fast we can build the project. We also have to define the build path. We will keep that empty for now, and DB connection, we will keep that empty for now. So we now have a valid configuration file. We can restart the language server. And here we can see that one project has been initialized. So in the status bar, we have chapter 3, version 1.0, and in the default configuration. We can also find some output in the language server. So here, this is the output, and something you should have a look at if you set up your project. This is exactly where you will find the information of the language server in the background. So here we know that we are working with OpenEdge 12.7, which is installed in this location. We have documentation cache, multiple cache being started. We have an OpenEdge client which is being started. So everything seems to be as expected. Let's open a source procedure. So test1.p. I have everything in my source directory. I attended the Gradle session, Gradle workshop this morning, where I just hope that Progress will enforce convention over configuration. So saying that if you are working with Gradle, it should be possible to compile automatically your code without having to specify where your source code is located. It would be a standard, a convention to say, if you put your source code in src OpenEdge or src main OpenEdge, then Gradle will be able to compile automatically your code without having to specify that my source code resides here. So currently, I dropped everything in the src directory, and if I modify something in this procedure, if I add something stupid, if I add garbage, save, nothing happens. The reason is that I didn't define any source directories to be watched when you in this specific project. So this belongs to the build path. And here we can add multiple objects. And in each object, we define a type, which can be a source directory or a ProPath entry. This is exactly the same as in Developer Studio. You are already able to define source directories or ProPath entries. This works exactly the same. So we define a source directory. Path will be src, so we will use any .p, .w, .cls in this src directory that will be considered source code. And we'll output the R code into target/build. So anything which is built by the build process is usually in a target directory, and then you define subdirectories, which means that if you want to clean up your local environment, you delete the entire target directory, so you can restart from scratch. Target build, and that's it. Configuration was changed, so we have to restart the language server. If we go to the output, language server is there, and here we can see that one source directory is defined. It is built into target build, and the PCT directory here, which is where the xref and input files and so on are computed. The references are computed. This goes in build.pct. So here we have three procedures. So when the language server is started, it will try to compile everything in the source directory. So you immediately have the feedback that test1.p is a compilation fail. The two other ones are successful. If we go to test1.p, we have both red squiggle lines saying that there is a compilation error at this line. We can also see that in the problems view, we have an unknown field or variable name, which is expected. So here we can do like a define variable Gilles as character, no undo. Okay, and then we compile. Compilation is done when you save the file. There is no Shift F2 to check syntax. There is no way to compile something. You save the file. This is compiled on the fly by the language server. So there is a monitoring process. Even if you modify something outside of VSCode, that will be trapped as long as the language server is running. The file modification will be trapped, and that will be compiled automatically. So the output will go to target build, and then we don't have to modify files inside VS Code to have the result. This means that if you check out a different branch in Git, that will be trapped automatically here by VSCode. So it will recompile all the files that are different between the previous branch and the new branch that you check out. This works also with include file references. If you modify an include file, all the .p or .cls that are using this .i will be recompiled. Same for classes or inheritance. If you modify the parent class, all the children classes will be recompiled. So let's say here we still have some blue lines. This means that something was detected by the language server. And here we have a variable which is defined but not used. So the language server will send a notification, is sending a notification to tell you something is wrong. You should do something with your variable. So we can say Gilles equals, and I'm in English keyboard. Here it is. And now we don't have the issue anymore because we are doing something. We will come back later to the rules that can be executed. This is a sample set of rules that you automatically have when you install the VSCode plugin. One of the things that you expect when you work with VSCode is to have some kind of code completion. So let's say if you type def, you will have some what can be typed at this point in the source code. So here we have define. If we type control space there, we have what can be injected after the define keyword. So this is exactly what will be a valid syntax. You only have access to what can be defined. So let's put a variable. Test1, control space, we have as a default. Here we have the various data types that can be injected in a source code. So let's put a date, for example. Here we have initial, today. Okay, here. If we do test2, we type obj, we have access to the built-in classes in progress. So if we type enter here, we automatically inject the using statement. And I know that it is currently always done using the using progress.lang or the package name.star from ProPath. There are multiple tickets that have been added in the issue tracker of the VSCode plugin to have various styles for the using statement. I am currently not in favor of using star in the header. It is much better to have the full class name that you want to use. So only progress.lang.object, so that if you have another object in your com.mycompany.object, you can still use this class name without having to define the full object name, the full class name. So that will come in future versions. So here we have variable 2 as an object, and no undo. If we do test2 colon, we have what is the methods and properties that are available by on this specific class, so next sibling, previous sibling, and so on. Let's define a new class. So RSS W, and it's my class.cls. How do we define? That's class. RSSW.myClass. We can have a public property prop1 as integer or in64 get set. We can define a constructor, for example. public, that's my class. And let's define one or two methods. I will remove, oh, right there. Okay, I'll just. +1, end. Okay, this compiles. So we can now go back to, within the project, the my class is available in your source directory, so it is available in the propath. So you can now define a new variable here that will be of this type. So my class. Here, it automatically injects the using statement in order to work with this specific class. And then we can say test3. And here we have access to the property. We have access to the method. And we can see the input parameter, the output parameter. We have access to the full signatures of all the methods available in your classes. Something that you also want to have, something which is expected in any IDE, is to have access to the documentation. So you want to type some documentation here, say returns XXX +1. Okay, let's go back here. Oops. And here, it doesn't work. No, that will work. Let's do some hover. Yes, okay, we have access to the documentation, which is automatically read from your from the comments in your classes, as long as you follow the Javadoc convention. So how many of you are using any kind of documentation in their classes? Just to know how far that can be useful. Yeah? Okay, yeah. And how do you display that? Do you work with OEDT? Or yes, so working with OEDT, you have access to the documentation. I don't think this is possible using as a plain developer studio, as far as I know. Ruben, maybe you can. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So something which is also very interesting to add, is the concept of deprecated methods. So you say something was available in the class, but then we want to replace this specific method with a new one, with a new method signature. So just to say, do not use this method anymore. You should switch to the new one. So here you can say deprecated annotation. So there is no impact on the source code. It's an annotation. So this is only read by the documentation process and by the language server. And here, if we go here, that should be available in the, okay, it's here. There is a strike through over the method name, so it shows that this method has been deprecated. It's also possible to specify a message next to the deprecated annotation to say use this method instead of the original one because of whatever the explanation. So this is when working with objects, working with procedure. We won't go into the lots of details of working with large procedures and so on. But this is more or less what you can get using code completion. Other things that you can do. You can execute applications directly from VSCode. The problem, oh no, I forgot something I wanted to add on the project configuration file first. Database connection. because here we are working without any database connection. I don't know any project, OpenEdge project, working without database connection. So we can configure the required database connection in the project. So we will define a sports database. You have to define the connection string. So this is a connect statement that will be executed by the AVM session in order to connect the database and in order to compile the local procedures and classes. So we will have a local target DB sports 2000 database. We will connect in read-only mode and with logical name sports. One comment about read-only connection. If you want to compile in a very fast way, you should work with a read-only connection. This is the fastest way to compile anything. There is nothing which is faster than local read-only. And on top of that, this means that you can start multiple threads without any issue. You can start 10 threads. They will all connect to the same, directly to the .db file or wherever the schema is, without having to start a database broker, which is an absolute pain. You don't want to do that. This is slow, it's painful. You have to deal with port numbers, it's painful. So you work with a local read-only database to execute the builds. Anyway, it is always, always, always a good idea to have the local schema, the data definition in your code repository. So this means that you need to have the local GF file in your repository, which means that you will end up with a database with the right CRC. This means that you will be able to compile locally and then execute your application, what has been compiled against another set of databases, which is because we will create a local database, but we don't need any data in this database to do the compilation. If we want to execute the application, we need some data. So we will then execute against a different set of database on your local machine, on the network, whatever you want. So you just decide. You just need to have exactly the same schema, the same CRC, and you can only do that if you version the DF files in your code repository. Here, I will just simplify things by just creating a sample Sports 2000 database. We have to define two other attributes. And those attributes are used by the language parser only. So we have the language server is written in Java. In order to do the code analysis, in order to transform the source code into a syntax tree, we need to have the schema of the database in memory. However, in Java, we don't connect to the database. We do that directly out of the DF file. So this is the reason why in your database connection, if you don't provide the DF file, many things will be missing in the outline view, and it will also complain on that it's not able to parse your source code. But compilation will be successful because the compilation part is done by the AVM. So the language server says, please, the AVM, please compile this file and put the R code in this location. But then it will do the analysis part, transforming or extracting the symbols out of the procedure. This is done in Java. So some parts will work, some other parts won't work. So this can be a bit disturbing. So make sure that you provide the dump file. So dump sports2000.df. And the aliases attribute is required, even if it's empty. So let's restart the language server. Let's go back to test1.p, and let's say we can do, so probably a typo here. The kind of information that you will face if something is not configured correctly. And yes, I know why. I didn't create the local database. So this is something that you will see. A couple of weeks ago, or months ago probably, there was no such message. If something is going wrong, you can go to the .builder directory. The .builder directory is created by the language server, and this is where all the temporary things will go. anything can be deleted in this directory. You can get rid of the directory. That will be recreated the next time you start the language server. So if something goes wrong, you can have a look at the log files there. And here, stdout0.log, this is a standard output of the AVM session, and client log, the sessions are started with client minus client log something, and log manager, whatever it is, and stdout is also redirected. So here, if we go there, it says that we cannot find the database, which is expected. In order to create the database, you can go to the terminal, and in terminal, the pro-env is available directly in VSCode, and so that will be open. If you have multiple OpenEdge runtimes installed on your machine, it will use a pro-env of the project which is currently being configured. And if you have multiple projects configured on your VSCode instance, it will ask you for which pro-env do you want me to start. So this is pro-env, so we will type prompt. It's open directly in the right directory, and here I prepared a build.xml to create a local database. So I will just execute &db. Oh yeah, it's not here, so %dlc, and bin &db. And I have a local database. Then I can restart the language server. If I go back to the output, this is started. If I go back to test1.p, find first. And here I have the list of tables from the post-2000 database. Find first build2 for display. Build2, I have access to the fields. I'm supposed to have access to the description, but maybe here there is nothing in the build2 table. Let's go to customer address. No, it looks like there is no documentation on those fields. Okay, that's nothing. So it knows about the database tables, the temp tables, and so on. Here, if we stop VSCode and restart VSCode, this is a virtual machine which is on EC2. It has been started, for those who know, for EC2, it has been started as a T2 medium, which is a very small instance. Here we have 4 gigabytes of memory, so it's really some crap. Your cell phone has more memory and probably more CPU than that. If we start again VSCode. Okay, VSCode is started, and now let's wait. We have to wait a bit. Oh, it's a bit long. Project is started, initialized. So it took 10 seconds on a crappy, absolute crap machine. I will not say anything about Developer Studio, but it's much longer than 10 seconds to start Developer Studio on such a machine, if it ever starts. But that doesn't do the same thing. So here we have the build path database connection. We can execute things. So by default, if you click F2, that will execute the local procedure. This is the same as what you have in the procedure editor. This is most likely not to be useful. The reason is that that will reuse the database connections that are configured in your OpenEdge project.properties. So this means that you will execute your application with empty databases where you just have the schema. So we had multiple ideas on how to design and say, how do we execute procedures or our application from VSCode? What is easy to do is to work with tasks. So tasks is a concept in VSCode, which is more quite similar to external tasks in Developer Studio, where you can execute any process. So the idea is to execute your OpenEdge session, you have your starting point in your application, which is usually always the same procedure, and you connect to a specific set of database. You have to pass some specific parameters, code pages, the minus param. You have to pass configuration files, and so it wouldn't be a good idea here to define a specific process in VS Code to define all of that. I know that this has been done in Developer Studio. I think it took a lot of time to do the implementation, to have one checkbox for this attribute, one checkbox for this attribute, and lots of text editors for this and that. I think it's easier and more flexible to just rely on tasks. So tasks are specified in a JSON file, and then you say, I would like to execute my TTY application, which is where I will use _progress, and all my arguments are specified here. So you just say, I execute something that will be executed as an external process. So you directly execute your application, but you make sure that you do that with what has been compiled locally. So you just point to the target/build directory here, so you work with local R code and execute what is currently in your source directory. We are not going to provide anything apart from that, and also we are not going to provide anything regarding passaway, for example. This is not the point of VS Code. We think it will be much easier for you to maintain your passaway instance by yourself. In your dev environment, you can have some scripts to generate a local passaway instance where you specify I just define a sample ABL application. I specify the propass pointing to my local directory, the various web handlers, for example, and then I start it outside of VS Code. Then you keep it up and running, so there won't be anything to monitor the status. You do that outside of VS Code. We are not going to do anything in this regard. So we want to keep that outside of the dev environment. Maybe in the future, somebody else will do an extension to manage that. That won't be part of this specific extension. So you manage that externally. We don't want to invest time in managing passaway instances and offer you a button to start the local passaway instance. We won't do that. No, you don't have to open a ticket. That will be closed. So just focus on code editing. We just focus on that, nothing more. So anyway, you will be able to connect to your set of database. So you will have to work with your set of PF files in order to connect to the databases on the network without having to connect on an empty database, which is pointless. Okay? You can define as many tasks as you want. Here, if we do a run task, it will offer all the entries which are defined in your tasks.json, and this JSON file can also be stored in your code repository. So this means that if you add a task, that will be shared with all the other developers. So make good usage of this file. You can share the various startup modes of your application, one mode with the debugger, one mode with a lot of log output, for example, one mode with passaway, one mode with, I don't know, whatever you want. Make sure that you don't hard code anything, because that will be executable by everybody, which means that will be executed in a different work directory, probably, because your colleagues will check out source code in a different directory than your checkout directory. So you have to be as platform agnostic as possible. What time is it? How much time do I have left? 5 minutes. Okay, yeah. So quick overview. We have many other things that can be executed by the language server and by the VS Code plugin. That was a short overview. Tomorrow morning we will have a workshop, 3 hours workshop, where you will be able to play with the images. If you didn't register yet, I think we still have 2 seats. No, not more than that. You would have to register with Cindy or Julie if you want to have a seat. So do that now if you want to play with VS Code. I didn't have time to show you the debugger that was expected. There were many other things to be shown. This is also why there is a workshop tomorrow morning. Try the plugin. Report issue. If something is not working, it's more or less open. It's an open process. It's not fully open source. The TypeScript code of the plugin is open source. The language server is not open source. It is free. It is free to use. That will stay free forever for what is currently available. This doesn't mean that everything will be free in the future. There might be paid extension. One paid extension is if you are a cable customer, so if you are using the code analysis for SonarCube, you can have you already have a license key that you can use in VS Code to execute the lint rules directly in VS Code. So you are already entitled to that. This is a paid extension. You need a subscription to the OpenEdge plugin for SonarCube. There might be other paid extensions in the future, probably regarding refactoring or advanced features, but what is currently available, code editing, code completion, execution of tasks, that will stay free forever. I just want to have something which is easily accessible to all the developers. You still have to pay for your license to progress. You need a 4GL dev license, which is what is required to execute the AVM. I don't care about what you do. For this is we just start the session. So if you don't have a license, you will be blocked. Just contact Progress. This is not my problem. There was one last point I wanted to mention, probably. Where is PowerPoint? I wanted to do extra details. So GUI, yes, it's not for GUI editing. It's possible to open the app builder from VS Code. There will never be any kind of GUI editing directly in VS Code. This is a code editor. If you want to use a mouse to move components, you open the app builder. There is a way to quickly do that from VS Code, but there will never be any visual designer. .NET, it's possible to have access to the .NET signatures from VS Code. There is a specific action to be done. Come to the workshop, you will know exactly how to do that. Source code, it's not available for the language server. It's available for the VS Code plugin. Progress licenses, support. If you want extended support, come to me. We can talk about that. If you want support for how to set up, how to maintain your dev environment with VS Code, you can come to me. And compared to the existing VS Code plugins, the plugin was based on Christophe Kamika's plugin. It has been completely rewritten. Almost nothing is being kept. You can still use Christophe Kamika's plugin. That will still work, but I don't think there is any really active VS Code plugin currently. And anyway, this is the only one working with a language server, which means it has knowledge of the full context of the project. So this is where things can really be done. Anyway, all the plugins have a ticket saying it would be good to have a language server. And the answer is always yes, but it takes a bit of time. Yeah, definitely. Questions? Yes? Okay, so what about extra parameters that you can pass to the AVM session? There is an attribute in the OpenEdge properties, OpenEdge project.properties, where you can specify extra parameters that are passed to the AVM. So you can say minus CP internal, minus TT word rules, minus whatever you want. Yes, absolutely. This is read by the language server, and when it starts, the various one or more AVMs, they are all started with the same parameters. Yes? So is there support for multiple versions of OpenEdge? Yes, so it is possible to work with multiple versions of OpenEdge. There is no specific dependency on the OpenEdge version. So you can have a project which is configured with 12.2 and another project defined with OpenEdge 12.7. You just have to define the install directory of each version on your machine, and then all the AVM will be started with a specific version. So currently, I know that the language server will provide you code completion for all the attributes that are available in the latest version, for example. So compilation will be done by the AVM, so that will be done by 12.2 or 12.7 or 11.7, whatever your version is. But then you might have, if you have a 11.7 project, code completion might give you some keywords coming from 12.7. So currently, you might have too many keywords in the code completion, if that was the question. But when you compile, you can use any version. We just start the session, execute some procedures to establish the communication between the language server and the various AVMs. So this can be done. We do the test starting from 11.7. We didn't test anything before 11.7. There are a few keywords that might not compile in 10-something, I'm sure. Okay, yes. So the question is, you want to, or the comment is, you have a project that you want to move from 11.7 to 12-something, for example. So the idea is, this is specified in your configuration file. You say, my project in the main branch is running 11.7. Usually, you create in Git a new branch, move to version 12 of project, for example. You just modify the first commit that you will have in this branch will be to change the OE version number in the project configuration file. So you just modify this attributes and say 12.2. So when you check out this branch, your AVM will be started with 12.2. So anything will be compiled with 12.2. So you will be able to do everything in this specific version. So moving from one version to another version can be done in a Git branch extremely easily. This is something that has been done for a few customers. They have separate branches for multiple versions of OpenEdge. Usually because in 12.2, they say, oh, we have to change something, and or we have to remove the classic app server and move to Passowy. So for sure, they have to modify a few procedure, entry points, and classes. So you just define a new branch for 12 support. Another question? No, it's, yes, last one. Yes. So when switching Git branches, it will automatically recompile what has changed. Is it possible to change that? Yes or no? There are build modes that are available in the project. So if you click in the status bar, if you click on the project name, you will have a pop-up saying, what do you want to build? So it says build, the default is build automatically or build what has changed. I can't remember the various options. So you may want to disable the build. Usually I recommend recompiling what has changed. Why wouldn't you want to recompile what has changed? Yeah, compile with local databases, everything local. Switching branches will be fast. It should. If you have a real developer machine, so I know some companies let the developer work with bad machines. This is a waste of money. Developer time is very expensive. If you have to wait 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes when you switch one branch to another, just because your machine is very slow as hell and you have to wait, this is 20 minutes of developer time that are wasted. So work with very powerful machine, fast SSD disks. This is the main point. Local databases, and you will see that you can switch branches in a few seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes at most, if you have lots of changes. It should be intelligent enough to be able to switch branches in a very quick way. Maybe you might have a very specific environment, but even on large environment, it's possible to switch branches in a quick way, or something has to be done. Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is a VS Code afternoon. So next session is about profiling in VS Code, and after that, this is followed by another VS Code session.